Hello, everybody, and welcome to Permaculture Smackdown. It's good to be back. We had a shitload of stuff going on over at Paul Wheaton's during the PDC and ATC, and so we've got a ton to share. Back. We had some very interesting shitload of stuff going on. Things happened during the PDC and ATC that we want to share with you, and this is going to be multiple parts because there's a lot. We just have a lot to cover. A lot of it's going to be about community. Mark says, "Hey, Montana, good to see you again." You too, Mark from Montana. I hope. I think that's Mark Harris from Montana. Anyway, yeah, we're excited to be here. Hope you enjoy the show, and we'll just kick it off with Paul. Can you share that list you've got of things you want to talk about so people get an idea of the things we're going to cover? We're not going to be able to cover it all in this one episode. We're probably going to end up having 3, maybe even 4 episodes to cover all of this stuff.
Get through it all. Yeah. But okay, it all started with the Kickstarter, and which we've mentioned in the previous Permaculture Smackdowns. We were doing a Kickstarter, and so when we get down to the last couple of days, then I am exhausted because I've been, a lot of people do a Kickstarter and they just stick it up there and they think everybody's going to just magically find it. And it's like, no, it's work. So, and you were here. You were here at my place while I was in the middle of that Kickstarter and doing a lot of it. So you got to experience firsthand a fair bit of that work as I was doing all the things that you need to do in order to do an effective Kickstarter. And yay, the Kickstarter was funded, $87,000. So, and in fact, I kind of wonder if some of the things we're going to talk about today have to do with the fact that if you get if you win the lottery, then what happens? Do all your friends and relatives say congratulations, or do all your friends and relatives have a different message, like perhaps a request or something like that? So then we had 3 days to go from Kickstarter mode into PDC mode. So before the Kickstarter was over, people were showing up to help get the PDC set up and rolling. And Josiah, you did a bunch of work here to get this to all work out. And then we jumped right into the PDC. And then a couple of days in, there was some real serious drama that was not on the video. So in fact, the thing to do is to say, the PDC and the ATC are done. We got it all on video. All the video is available. And for the little bits of drama that made it into the video, you can go and see that whenever you want. It's all up there. We didn't cut anything out. Anyway, it turned out that there was a community issue going on up on the lab. And I thought everything was sweet. I thought it was all gravy train. Unbeknownst to me, that there were some people that were unhappy, and so that leads to drama. Now, of course, with me today is Fred Tyler. So he's currently our longest resident. You've been here over 2 years.
Yeah, a little more than 2 years.
And I've been calling Fred the property manager. Is that a fair title?
Sure. What do you want your title to be, Fred?
I don't know. Paul's been calling me the land manager.
Oh,
Is it
land.
property manager?
Yeah.
I would say property shows the intention or the more of the it's owned by someone than the land manager. Sure, doesn't matter. Fred, the property land manager.
So I think your story is a pretty interesting one. You want to tell people your story about when you arrived?
Yeah, I just Paul was offering a free PDC for residents and people that had been here long enough, and so to be here, you'd be working for a month ahead of time, and so I came. Well, 4 weeks ahead of time. So I came 4 weeks and a day early, and then I worked, and it was fulfilling work, and I was having a good time, learning stuff, and feeling appreciated as a valuable member of the community. And then the PDC happened, so that was 2 weeks, and then I was planning to go back to Minnesota after that, but those 6 weeks were so good that I just stuck around.
All right, so to clarify, when you say people in the area, or it's a free PDC for people in the area, you mean you don't have to live in the area where Paul lives. It's that you have to come a couple weeks early, 4 weeks early in this case, work to get the PDC, right? That was the deal?
It was if you're coming and working on Paul's projects. Then,
okay.
Yeah.
And when you say you felt comfortable within the community or accepted by the community, what was the community? How big was the community? What was the status of the community when you came in?
It was pretty small. There was just a couple people here. The Ant Village challenge had just started, and Evan, being the first ant, was here. And then during that 6 weeks, other people showed up that made it, more.
For the ant, to be part of the ant program?
Yeah, or just to help in other way. They were part of the Gapper program.
Lots of different programs, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And now Fred's been on a lot of your podcasts, right, Paul?
I don't know, like maybe 8 or 9.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think you've listened to almost all the podcasts, and so I kind of have a thing with my podcast where if you listen to all the podcasts, then I'll be glad to record a podcast with you, because that person would then ask questions that are not currently in the podcast.
Right.
And I'm trying to not make duplicate content in the podcast.
Right.
And I think that the important thing is that we had a guy that was here then that was the acting land manager, and that didn't work out. He, in fact, I think it's fair to say that he stole from a lot of people. He turned out to be rather criminal, and then he's gone. And so then Fred stepped right in, and that I think you've been filling that role ever since.
Fred had the go-get-'em attitude. Now, we're probably going to dive a lot into that kind of history as we go on later in the show, right? The history of the community. But for now, I'm looking at this list, and I'm not seeing that at the beginning of the list.
The talk about Fred thing?
No, the talk about the community, and I kind of brought that up out of turn, of trying to get a feeling of what the community was like when Fred joined the community. But I think we're going to go into a lot of history of the community at Wheaton Labs here pretty soon, right?
I think a little bit. I think what I want to do is I want to first talk about, like, why do we give a shit about community at all? And I think a lot of people did the thing at some point in their life where they had housemates or roommates, and so then it's like, well, was that a good experience for them? And I think for most people, it was both very, very good and very, very shitty. And so they probably had some extremely horrible drama around washing dishes, and it was so horrible that they had to get out. And maybe their first experience out as an adult living with other people by choice probably destroyed a friendship and turned them off to community living possibly forever. And it's kind of like, okay, so and then there's the whole thing about how Bill Mollison's basically painting a picture in the Big Black Book that a large part of community, or a large part of permaculture, is replacing petroleum with people. And then when you do that, then of course there's got to be some element of community. But when you bring people together, it's kind of like it's almost going to be like dating and marriage. And so often you meet somebody and or you see somebody and you're like, yeah, I'm not dating that person. And then it's like, or if you do decide that they make that 1% cut, you are going to date them, then it's like, okay, one date was enough. And it's like, it's very rare to find that person where you're going to develop a long-term relationship that's going to last more than a couple of years. And it's kind of like, okay, well, what does that take? Now, and then if we have community, if we want to have all the upsides of community without the downsides of all the drama, then it's kind of like, okay, how do we design a community to get that? And the current models that are generally accepted are either something that's consensus-based or something where it's at least a horizontal decision-making process, which could include sociocracy or holocracy, or central leader. There could even be some systems where there's going to be like a council of sorts that will make decisions. So it'll be a representative system. So these are the general models. Now, of course, if you look at the downsides, you end up with a lot of people who just live like they live in an apartment without housemates or roommates, or they live in a house without housemates or roommates, or they live something where they're fairly single, and maybe someday they'll have a spouse or a pseudo spouse, somebody that will share the space with them. It'll be an intimate partner. So we have an anonymous viewer who has posted a question. Are people potentially more combustible than petroleum? I would say the answer is no. I would say that petroleum is probably far more predictable than people. And petroleum doesn't, well, by the time you purchase your petroleum, all of the drama associated with it has been cut away. So it's very processed petroleum. Whereas people, it's like if you try to cut away the drama, a lot of times they die from the process.
Yeah, petroleum has a lot less feelings than people. So people are more combustible with the feelings, but petroleum is much more combustible scientifically.
So
hope that answers your question, Anonymous.
Do you want to mark that as answered now? And then, by the way, people can go ahead and post stuff in this chat window. We can see the chat window here, too.
Yeah, you guys can hit chat, or if you have a specific question for us, you can hit the Q&A button, and we'll interrupt what we're saying to talk about whatever the heck you want to talk about, for the most part. All right, so continuing. Now, first thing, before you continue down this, before we continue down this path, which is going to be a lot of conversation, I want to say that in the Big Black Book, you're referring to the Permaculture Designer's Manual, which was written by Bill Mollison. And yeah, I'm sure you've got it right there. plug for Bill.
Well, and I'm also kind of thinking it's like page 6 or something where
what right.
You can kind of see this chart stuff where basically he's trying to spell it out that you're replacing petroleum with people.
Right. Well, what I wanted to touch base on is the community side. So when I read the PDM, I think when he talks about community, or even when he's talking about it, he's talking about in permaculture, we would like to be surrounded by people that are providing or producing things that we can use so that we're not having to do it all ourselves, because it's just not going to be feasible for me to be doing all of these things that I need to build a permaculture site very quickly, at least. And so it's going to be a great benefit if you have others in your area that are maybe specializing in certain things, and then you're all sharing those things to help everybody succeed quicker. And of course that's community. but I don't know that it's necessarily the intentional community, or it could be an intentional community, but it's not necessarily the community on one person's piece of property. This could be like a neighborhood with an HOA where it's like, you just can't live here unless you've got these, but you will have your own property, but you need to have these kind of skills. I mean, there probably are other ways to do it, but more than likely for something to succeed, it would need to be an intentional community with where everybody's sharing a very precise goal. And the other problem there is that a lot of intentional communities fail, like what, 80% plus fail within a couple of years, right?
And so then it's like, okay, now we got to set up your metric for fail, and I think that if you're going to talk about intentional community where it's more than two unrelated people sharing property in some way, or a property or a structure even, then it's kind of like, is that still going on? Is there two or more unrelated people that are not in an intimate relationship? I mean, fuck, it'll take a long time to try and define what this means. But are they still there, or is there somebody still there? And the answer to that question is 90% fail, and that the formal community is no longer there. Like they gave the community a name, and now that name does not still stand.
They might reveal, right? They might try again with a different governance structure or something like that.
Or a totally different group of people maybe, or something like that. But is it still listed at ic.org? There's a fair test right there. And if they take down their listing, is it because they're full up, or is it because no one's going to answer your emails? There's no one there anymore. They're not doing that anymore. And then if you go and you visit the 10% that are a success, generally you're going to find that 90% of those, there's nobody that's been there for even 2 years. It seems like 2 years is kind of a magical number. And so then that's a metric for a relatively successful system. If you look at, this is for consensus-based systems dominantly. So it's kind of like, all right, well, what does it take to succeed? And so I started traveling this path to try and figure out a better system in 2005. And I have been very involved, because I do sincerely believe that if you're going to get community to work, and it is important, it is, I think that is possibly, out of all of permaculture, it's possibly the most important thing.
But the why is like, why is that's what I want to hit on first, is why is the community so important on getting this done? Is it just so that we're sharing these specialties and building quicker, or is there another reason to have community? And also, I would like Fred's opinion on that too.
Okay, start with Fred. Go, Fred. Go.
I think there's something within us where we need to interact with other humans. Some people try and reject that, but I think that's a big part of community, is just the social interaction and being around like-minded folks.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you say try and ignore that, those are the people that like live in a neighborhood, don't even know their neighbors, or maybe they know their first name, that's it, ignore them. And they've really kind of replaced that human connectivity with characters on a TV screen. Things like that.
People on the internet.
Right.
I think you were getting at a point of saying, like, you could be in a neighborhood and a community naturally forms. I think that's entirely plausible. And that can be an excellent community. And I think you'll find that for every time it's an amazing and excellent community and there's wonderfulness to it, that there's probably 20 situations where it turned into something more resembling a comedy or a tragedy. And so I think you're going to find a lot of people that tend to just, hunker down. But I think that the advantages to community are more than just our social needs. But when you do have good social needs being met, when you have people at your table even, and that's been some of the stuff that I've experimented with, is sharing a table with a dozen other people on a regular basis. When you have this kind of thing happening on a regular basis, there is a powerful positive. But moving beyond that, it's like, what are some other things? Josiah, I'm sure you can list off 5 things off the top of your head. 5 great benefits.
Yeah, well, security is one big thing for me at least. I like the security of having people around me that I trust and can rely on if needed, and they can rely on me. That's a big thing for me, and something I enjoy sharing. Family, raising children. I think raising children in a strong community is a lot better than having a school system, or like a public school system, raise your child for you. In a community where you might not know most of the parents of the other children your child is living with. I mean, they're really living with them, it's most of the day, or it's 8 hours of the day. They'll come home, spend another 4 before they go to bed, and then they're out again, being raised by something else. So that's a big part of community. Those are the 2 big parts of community for me, is the security and the family raising. And of course, there's many other reasons. What fascinates me more is the reasons people don't do it, or why we've gone from a society where community was much more prominent to a society we have now where there's a lot bigger communities, but those communities aren't connected. The people aren't connected with each other. You could call a neighborhood in New York City a community, but more than likely most of those people aren't going to know each other. And so that fascinates me, in that just the why, or the reasons why it has become the normal to not have these strong connections with other people. And a big part of it could be our desire of independence, where we don't want everybody in our business, knowing our shit, because maybe we're assholes in some degree. Another thing is that I find is that highly intelligent people are often not the best in social situations. They're not, like, these are highly desirable people in a society or in a community. However, they're not good with interacting with other people, or they're viewed as not, because they just have a social, they don't talk, or they can't put up with the dumbness, right? When they're talking to someone and someone's talking back to them, and it's clearly they're not on the same intellect level, it's hard to continue that conversation for a lot of people. And you might find that when you're talking with someone that's like clearly not understanding what you're thinking about, or your interests. So those are my quick thoughts, which bring up a lot more questions, I'm sure.
So I want to continue the list and say something about, like, let's say that you are on acreage, and there's a total of 10 adults on this acreage. And then the time comes that you're thinking, like, okay, we want to buy a tractor. So part of it is that you're going to go and buy a tractor, and you get 90% off. So you have a tractor, and you can use as much as you want, but you only paid 10% of what everybody else in the world paid for that tractor. So there's going to be a lot of stuff. If you're sharing the same house, then you don't need nearly as many couches. You don't, I mean, almost everything, you don't need nearly as much. So suddenly your expenditures are dramatically reduced. In fact, I did serve on an intentional community incubator board for a couple of years. And it seems like for most people, you could live a life that is like 2 to 3 times more luxuriant, and the actual cost would be half. And so the cost for electricity would be half. The cost for heat, half. Yeah, and when it came to like maintaining the structure or cleaning it or anything like that, all of that stuff would be half, while at the same time 2 to 3 times more luxuriant. And so it's kind of like that's some pretty powerful perks. And then you know, on our notes over here, Fred is pointing it out. If you want to talk about a petroleum footprint or a carbon footprint, it's like community easily cuts either of those in half. And so, and there's more to those stories, and I've written extensively about it. And each one of those topics could easily fill one Smackdown. But the benefits are profound. And I think a lot of the people have never really tried, and they don't really know how great it is. But one of the things is that I explained during the PDC, I think on the first day or maybe later, is that when I took my PDC in 2005, I got this feeling. There was 24 students, and I kind of thought, I want to live this way, like what we're experiencing during this class. I want to live this way the rest of my life. And so the tables that we have at mealtime are exactly the same size of tables that were at the PDC that I attend. And the size of the class is almost exactly the same. Almost everything that we're shooting for is extremely similar in order to create an environment where people can come together like that. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I think for a lot of people too, they travel down the permaculture road and they start learning about bits and bobs and little here and little there. And then at some point in time, they kind of come to the conclusion of like, there's a big click, and it's like, now I get it. Now I want to live permaculture the rest of my life, and I want to do it with other permaculture people. I don't want to be swimming upstream. So often if you continue your life and you've gone through the click moment, at least that's what I always call it, the click moment, then it's kind of like everybody around you, a little bit like what you were just saying, everybody around you, they just kind of seem like unenlightened cattle. Like they've never heard of permaculture. They don't know. You try to talk to them about gardening or hugelkulture or anything, and it's like they don't get it. They don't want to know. You know, food comes from McDonald's, and they're perfectly comfortable getting it there. And once in a while, they'll try Pizza Hut or Kentucky Fried Chicken instead, or Taco Bell, or whatever is their favorite fast food. And maybe once a week they'll go to a restaurant where you actually sit down, and maybe a few times a week they'll actually go to a grocery store to get some things to put in the freezer that they can put in the microwave oven later. And that's how they want to live, and their life is about rooting for the home team and stuff like that. But I don't know, I think we all go through something at some point where we realize there is a better way. And it's like maybe a loved one didn't make it through the cancer challenge or some other illness, and you kind of start to get this idea that it came from your food choices, and you want to do better. And then there's the whole thing, you were mentioning something about security. I was thinking like safety.
Yep. And
it's like to be with a bunch of people that understand what you're talking about and what it is that you're seeking, and you're working together. Not because it's like, okay, Fred, you are now required to help the community, and you have to go put in these hours, and we'll tell you what you're going to do. Or Josiah, you have to do these things. No, I think a good system is going to be an extremely diverse system. And I think that there's going to be a system where some people never work, and there's going to be some people who do. I mean, if you show up to a community and you slap down 25 grand and then you build a house and you've got your food systems and stuff like that, and you just keep to yourself, and well, you know, come out and visit with people, play some checkers or whatever it is your thing, but you live extremely humbly, then okay, that's legit. And then somebody else shows up and they don't have the money to slap down, and they find a niche, they do some kind of work that they do enjoy, and it fits within the community, you know, then it works. Somebody else might find work that they enjoy, but nobody values it, and so they can work 80 hours a week and they end up making $1 an hour because nobody values it, you know. And so it's like that's your choice. Other people, what's that?
Well, I was just you touched on my phrasing of security, and I wanted to specify, when I say security, I don't mean like I have a bunch of people with guns around me. What I mean is that I have a comfort level. Like, I'm comfortable. I know that I'm going to have food tomorrow. That's security to me. I know that I've got good people around me. That's security to me. And I feel confident in the future. That's
confidence in the future. Like not only you know that you're going to eat tomorrow, but you know that you're going to have no trouble at all eating for the next 3 years.
Right.
No matter who is elected into what office. You know, however that whole thing goes down, you know you're going to have food, shelter, warmth, and community. And so your biggest needs will definitely be met. And then we can start talking about like actual coin, you know, so you can have a cell phone and internet, a laptop, and you know, fancy clothes or whatever your thing is, you know. And I also want to stress that, you know, some people work 80 hours a week and they bring in 100 times more money in a year than people who don't work at all or work extremely little or whatever. And everybody's going to have their idea of what's comfortable, what's their comfort level, what's their safety level. I think another thing is like, if you have $1 million, how safe are you compared to somebody who's got a full permaculture system? I mean, you got $1 million. What are you going to spend your $1 million on?
Right.
And
You'll
I
blow
mean,
through that $1 million in no time, or most people will.
Most people will. Are you going to spend it wisely?
Yeah.
I think that's a hell of a challenge to spend it wisely. I think that the benefits of community are profound and multifaceted, and the downsides are typically bigger and more horrific. And it's kind of like if a person has been through a horrible divorce, or if they've seen community fail, like if they've been involved as community fails, then I think that they felt an enormous amount of heartbreak when that happened. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, I loved the upsides, but how do I mitigate or eliminate the downsides? And that's the thing that we don't currently have a great solution for. There are some solutions, and they tend to be the systems that are working really well tend to be somewhat spiritually based. And I think a lot of people are kind of like, you know what, I want to be in community, but I don't want to be having some kind of spiritual requirement on me. Like if I've got my own spiritual thing or my own religious thing, I want that to be a private thing. It's just me, not like there's this other person over there telling me what I gotta think or what I gotta feel.
When you bring up the analogy of divorce, I think of it this way: when you're in a relationship, it goes sour. You get a divorce. After that divorce, it's devastating. It's like, I'm done with this relationship crap. I don't want any more of it. And I'm just going to go my whole life without any more relationships because that was terrible. And that might be the same thing with community, right? You go through the community, things go south, it goes terrible, you're like, I'm done with community. But that love always comes back. Like you end up finding someone else, and you've learned a lot of things from the previous marriage. You've got a better understanding of what you're looking for, what doesn't work. At least you understand that you've learned from it, and you find someone else that looks attractive and meets the qualities, or doesn't have the major disadvantages that caused the divorce in the first place, and move on. And same with community, perhaps. You've been in a community, it went south, you got out of it. Your first reaction is, I'm done with communities, intentional communities. But then something else might come along because 90% of these things are failing, it's probably a good thing, because we're all learning from those experiences of why they failed, so we can continue trying to build them up and build better, more resilient communities.
I just wanted to say more about the value of community. I think one of the big benefits is a diversity of skills and a diversity of perspectives, which, I think diversity of skills definitely adds to security or of the community. Something breaks, or someone might know how to fix it, or someone's building something, someone can help with that.
Yeah, you run into this all the time, right? Even when people are just visiting the community, maybe they're doing the gaffer program for a week or two, and they've got skill sets. Like the first thing one of the first things you're probably doing is figuring out what kind of skills they have, right? To see how they can help the rest of the community with those skills that might be missing.
Right, yeah, like how can they make a valuable contribution and still get something out of it, not just be like, not just bored because they're doing what they always do in their normal life, but they're still learning something new. And
yeah, that's a good point too, right? If someone comes in and they're a carpenter, and you have a ton of carpenter work that needs to be done, but they're there for that experience of learning something or getting something else out of it, you don't just stick them on the carpenter jobs the whole time, right?
Right, but it's good to have their perspective and ideas to add to the carpentry work that we're doing, but also give them a chance to learn about whatever it is that we're doing.
And I'll bet when those people show up, you don't find them saying, yeah, I'm a carpenter, but fuck that, I'm not doing any carpenter shit. Most of them are like, you'll be doing a carpenter project, and they're willing to chime in. They're going to go, wait, you should do it this way, you're forgetting this, or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes that works. We've had some people show up to say that they are expert carpenters, and then we learned that that there needs to be a metric for what expert means, perhaps. Wow, there was some comical things. We've also had some people here that are expert carpenters, and they're expert carpenters. They've done amazing stuff. And we've had some people show up that, they bring amazing skills. But usually for every person that shows up and they have amazing skills, there's probably 6 that say they have those amazing skills. And it turns out to be not so much. And then it becomes awkward and weird, sad, frustrating. But I kind of feel like we do a good job of bullying through and like making the best of it. But we have had some people where it's like they're very insistent that Fred's a dumb fuck and fuck what Fred says, and so then they go over Fred's head to me, and then they come to the conclusion that I'm a dumb fuck and that they should really be in charge of everything here. And yeah, that kind of thing, you think that never really happens. Like, no one would ever do anything like that. And it's like, oh, it happens quite a lot, really.
And a lot of that could be from someone just visiting a community, not understanding the full history of everything that's happened and the reasons you do things a certain way, because they're just jumping in and seeing it, and it's totally different than what they're used to seeing. And so to them, it does seem like this is fucking retarded. But if they would have known the history and the reasons why, hopefully it would come to, and they would be like, okay, I understand. Now the downside of that is there's a lot of history and a lot of talking that needs to be done to be able to get people to understand those things.
I think a lot of that's going to come back to like how people are taught to communicate, and basically dickishness is a communication style that is admired and is rewarded. And I think dickishness might not even be the best word. I usually go with fallacy. I mean,
or arrogance.
For somebody to come in and brazenly state their opinion as absolute fact, it's amazing how effective that is. And it's like a Jedi mind trick. And it's like they come in and they say it, and then the weak-minded people all go like, oh, yeah, okay. And they go along with it. And so it's like the style that people communicate today is so disrespectful and offensive, and yet remarkably effective, that they feel like if they just come in and they speak abrasively and that kind of stuff, they'll get what they want to have. And the reason why they think it'll work is because it's worked in the past so great. But of course, you know, if you're trying to move something forward, that doesn't help. It actually fucks everything up. And so I kind of feel like some communication skills go a long way as to helping things to be smooth and move forward and improve overall forward velocity.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's at the root of a lot of stuff about how to get anything to work. And when you're 18 years old and living with housemates for the very first time, you might not have exactly honed those skills just yet. You're still working on being abrasive to mom and dad to get what you want, and they're giving up and just giving you whatever the fuck you want, just because they just want a little fucking peace, you know?
Yeah.
If I just give you whatever you ask for, will you fucking be quiet?
That's why I think negotiation
for a
skills.
couple of days.
I think negotiation skills are one of the most important things we can be teaching children from an early start, is how to negotiate through things instead of just telling them no or yes they can have something, or like they're crying all the time so you just cave in and just give it to them. I think it'd be a lot better for society if much more negotiation was happening with children, and we would see a reduction in a lot of this mentality of coming in and just telling you how shit is.
Or instead of negotiation, what about persuasion? Because it kind of seems to me like, if we're going to talk about a parent-child relationship, it does seem like child makes demands, parent gets sick of this shit and just is like, here, just take the fucking candy and shut the fuck up, leave me alone. And so the parents don't want goodness and decency. That was a pipe dream from before they were parents. Now they just want some peace. And I think that a lot of that carries over into a short-term community. I don't think it can last in long-term community. And in fact, I think that there's a lot of stories to be told for how these kinds of techniques, even in communities, like Diana Leaf Christian, who wrote the two dominant books on community, in her own community, Earthaven, she talks about how when they had a consensus-based system, that for many years, decisions were dominated by whoever was the loudest and the most hostile and crazy. Because the other people that were there were kind of like, I just want to go and have a nice day. I'd rather just go along with that person just so I can go back to having a nice day. Because of course consensus-based systems are, we're all going to sit here and keep talking about it until we reach consensus. Right. And so a lot of consensus-based systems are driven by whoever is the most hostile. Right. You know, hostility is rewarded. I'll keep being hostile to the whole group until you all do as I say. Right. And it's like, and apparently at Earthaven, they finally, after years, caught on to this, and they started evicting the hostile people, and then being like, no, I will not be bullied into a decision, because we end up just all getting burned in the long run.
Right. I'm just curious if you know whether they kept the consensus-based. So they're banning these people now, but are they continuing with the consensus-based?
I think Earthhaven has moved on to sociocracy.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure about that though. Right. I haven't kept up as well as I would like.
All right, so I think we've hit the hammer on the head pretty hard on why community.
And to wrap up this little package, I think that what we're doing here is we're trying to experiment with ways to solve the community puzzle. How do you have all of the upsides and reduce the downsides? And so I've got a lot to say about that. And of course, the function of this podcast is you were here the whole time. And of course, Fred was here the whole time. The three of us were all here the whole time that that I did the Kickstarter. I think you showed up like for the last week and a half or so of the Kickstarter.
No, I was there. I was there from the moment you launched to the end.
Okay. All right. Right. I think you were gone for a little bit in the middle of the Kickstarter, maybe.
I'll take a 1 week break.
Okay. All right. All right.
Yeah.
So all three of us were here for all of the Kickstarter, and then we had like a 3-day gap between the end of the Kickstarter and the start of the PDC. So then there was the scramble to get ready for the PDC. And then the PDC started, and we had some technical difficulties with the live stream stuff. And so you and I were in full scramble to try and resolve that. And then drama hit in the middle of the PDC, and it's like, what the fuck? And then more drama, and it's like, where the fuck is all this? And so then we found out that the community up on the lab was unhappy, and it took a while for me to figure out that was the root of all of this drama that kept coming up. But as a result, I spent very little time in the PDC. I mean, I was there during the PDC for an hour every morning, because that was the format. And then I taught 2 segments. Was it 2? Maybe 3. I taught possibly 3 segments. So I was there, but at the same time, I spent a lot less time there because I was dealing with the drama. Not only the extra work of like, we got to solve our internet problems for meeting the needs of the Kickstarter, but then the drama. So it's kind of like, all right, when all was done, then you, Josiah, said, we got to put this into the Permaculture Smackdown. This is a lot of important stuff. Normally, I think we would be talking right now about all of the details of all the things, all the wonderful, beautiful things from the PDC. I mean, we had some amazing speakers, and their presentations were spectacular. It was profound. I think a person would be hard pressed to attend a better PDC anywhere in the world. And we got it all on video. That worked. It all worked. We got it up there. Josiah played such a massive role in that. And at the same time, I was so preoccupied with all of the problems and drama. I got to spend hardly any time with my friends that were the guest instructors, as well as attending and participating and playing a part. And then it carried on.
And we ended up with a lot of awesome artifacts from the ATC.
Yes, magnificent. It's like, really, that would be a big part. Talk about now the massive food dehydrator solar food dehydrator that was made. The biofilter. There's the chest freezer that was turned into a refrigerator. There's the what do they call the easy bake coffin? We got kind of a slow cooker thing that was made. I mean, there's gobs and gobs and gobs of artifacts, but instead, from the perspective of the three of us, all of those things were dramatically overshadowed by drama that came from community. And it's like, okay, we gotta talk about this first. And so look at how here we are, we're getting close to the end of today's Permaculture Smackdown, and we've hardly made any progress on our list. But okay, why community? I think we've painted enough of a picture. I mean, I think that we could easily go on for 5 or 6 more hours about the benefits of community and the wonderfulness of community. But for now, I think it might be a good time to go on to the next one. Or we could actually, there's some questions that have been posted.
Yeah, well, okay, so to set the picture, everybody, we've got 10 minutes left. We try and keep this show at about an hour. That's why it's going to be a multi-part series. I think we've spent a good portion of it on the why community. I want to set the stage on why each of us is here, like what perspective we're coming in to the community, or we'll say Paul's community. So from my view, the way I'm coming into it is I'm a temporary, right? I've been to Paul's community. I've spent quite a bit of time there, but that's minuscule compared to the amount of time that Fred spent there. And so I'm coming in as a spectator, right? I show up and I don't have the full backstory. I'm the one that's there that needs the full backstory or feels they do. And so I'm not living there. So that's where I'm coming from, or that's my point of view in this triplet of people we got here. So Fred's point of view, do you want to just kind of explain how you vision your point of view of why we're all here, or in comparison to the rest of us?
I mean, I guess I'm here as a member living in the community, who's been here, for a while and seen some lots of good stuff happen as being part of this community, but also seen some crazy.
Well, yeah, all the bad stuff that you've all learned from, or that's part of the learning experience. But so I'm temporarily just seeing the community. Fred's living in the community and managing a big part of the workers that come there and end up living in the community. And Paul's perspective, where are you at, Paul?
I want to see permaculture move forward. And this is part of what happened to me a long time ago that is the next part to talk about, and that is that in 2005, I realized I want to do 3 times more than what Sepp Holzer has done. But if I stayed on Mount Spokane in 2005, the best I could do with all the rest of the hours of all the rest of my life is to do 80% of what Sepp had done, which still doing 80% of what Sepp's done is a noble thing. But at the same time, I am just extremely passionate about how I want to do 3 times more. Now, since then, Sepp has accomplished so much more, but at the same time, I want to do 10 times more than what Sepp has done up to now. And I realize there's no way I can do it by myself. Therefore, it has to be with community. And now I also think that with the existing community models, if Sepp Holzer was in an existing community model on his land, I don't think he would have accomplished even 5% of what he has currently accomplished. And so I kind of feel like, all right, so we need a system that can be set up so that it minimizes the drama, the downsides of community living, accentuates and amplifies the upsides of community living. At the same time, would not only allow Sepp to accomplish all that he did accomplish, but hopefully be able to do 10 times more. And so it's like, how do we design a community that'll do that? And it's kind of like,
can be replicated, right?
Pardon me?
And can be replicated.
And can be replicated. And so it's kind of like, Ant Village was one example of something that we tried. Deep Roots is another example. And it's kind of like, now we're going into the boot camp. And at this point in time, I kind of feel like the boot camp is good, because what I want to do, and this is something that I talked about years ago. I talked about this idea of husp, and the idea of husp is, suppose that when the white folks came over and then they met Pocahontas, that instead of developing the relationship that was developed, that the white folks went home with arrows in their ass, and the nation that was already here, which was already, I mean, permaculture is a lot like the agricultural systems of the native people that were here in America 500 years ago. And so what would happen if they remained a nation unto themselves, and their mere permaculture systems evolved over the following 400 some odd years, and what would it be like now? So then I've got this concept, what I call re-husp, which is the idea of how might we rediscover that state. And I basically came up with this idea of, like, what if you can have a place where there are 20 artisans in seed and soil, and they each have their own way of doing things, and then maybe a couple of times per year you put them all on a bus and you drive them around to all 20 plots, and then each artisan is going to be like artisans are, and they're going to think to themselves, all the other 19 are shit, but number 12 is doing an interesting thing with hogs, but they're doing it all wrong. So this year I'm going to do hogs, and I'm going to demonstrate to number 12 how to do it right. And then, and of course, number 7 is doing a terrible job of polyculture. And so I'm going to set the new pace for polyculture, but using some of their terrible ideas and doing a much better job. This kind of thing, it's not about being competitive exactly. It's more about, like, absorbing all of the other ideas that they see. So it's like, okay, how do I get to the point that I've got these 20 artisans in seed and soil here and permaculture moves forward? How do I get to the point where, because I don't need to build the thing that's 10 times more than Sepp Holzer, I just need it to exist. I just need it to happen before I die. I'm old and fat. How much longer do I have? So somebody recently brought up the idea of Paul's greedy and wants money, and this is all about money. And it's kind of like, if I wanted money, I would have stayed in software engineering because the pay for this is shit. So it's like, no, I'm just obsessed with this idea of the future of permaculture, of being able to do so much more than Sepp ever did, and all of these things that can happen when you have 20 people coming together and bonkers about permaculture. Maybe it'll take more than 20. Maybe it'll take 25 or 30. But I'm willing to roll with that. But I do think that me all by my lonesome with a big gob of money isn't going to pull it off either. It's got to take people that are bonkers about permaculture.
All right. We are almost out of time. That is a great place to stop for today. We are going to answer. We got a couple questions we're going to answer. But as far as our list of topics we want to cover, that's where we're going to kind of stop there. I want to mention that Fred isn't going to be able to join us next week, but he will be able to join us the following week after that, right, Fred? You're just going to the moon or something. What are you doing?
Yeah, close. Yeah, the moon. That's good.
Moon. Yeah.
Cool. So, but we brought Fred on because of the connection Fred has with this community. It's very important, I feel, that we get the perspective of Fred, because Fred's on the ground with everybody all the time, where Paul is in the office managing things from a distance. He's having to do the very high level stuff. And then my perspective, of course, is I'm just coming in and seeing what's going on and making assumptions. So, to me, it was very important to get all three of these aspects so we can discuss the community topic much more. So next week we're going to dive more into it, and then the following week even more so with Fred joining us.
Well, I think next week we're going to talk about we're going to do some other kind of topic and dodge this one until Fred comes back.
Yes,
right?
And we might hit on the some of the artifacts that we did during the ATC. We might talk a lot more about the ATC PDC kind of stuff than the community stuff.
So I see that Roger Austin has a long question. You want to read it?
Sure. Roger, it's 3 paragraphs, guys, so bear with me. What attributes do successful, however defined, intentional communities share? Communication and negotiation already mentioned. In the past, if you left your community, you might starve, be much worse off economically, be literally isolated. Today, the downside of leaving about any community is very low, which is good and bad. Paul mentioned spiritual aspects of community. Would introducing permaculture to existing spiritual communities / churches make any sense if they already have the community thing working, or other non-spiritual existing communities that might be open to it? I have an idea how that would happen. And then Roger's next thing is there a spot on the Permies blog for these topics so that we can continue after today?
All right, so I guess starting with the last one, I mean, the Permies forums, we have a forum called Community, and that would be a great place to talk about a lot of this stuff. And I think you'll find there's already a lot of discussion there, including a lot of the things that that we're sharing today. All right, what attributes do successful intentional communities share? If we're going to go by successful in that they've existed for a long time and you've got people that are there for much longer than 2 years, then I'm thinking like Damanhur is an example. What's the one in Scotland? Oh man, why can't I remember the name of it? Maybe somebody will type it in on the chat thing. Findhorn. It's Findhorn. And I think there might be a couple in the United States as well, but there's not very many. And then when I was down in Santa Fe doing my keynote, I was also on a panel where we're talking about community, and it seemed like there was this couple there, and they had written a book for their community, and it was a very kind of touchy-feely kind of community. I would say that they had some kind of spiritual element there. Then there's one that I have visited in the Seattle area called Songaia, and a lot of people there had been there for more than 2 years, and they tended to get together once a week in a community house. And one of the reasons why it's called Songaia is that they sing a lot as a group. They love to sing a lot. Then there's going to be things like an abbey or a convent. And so, but you're going to have a very structured life. And that's another thing too, is like even in Damanhur, my understanding is that every resident of Damanhur, which is an amazing artistic community, but every resident of Damanhur is required to spend a minimum of 4 hours per day meditating. So these are, I don't know if Findhorn has a spiritual element or not, but they've got a very large community and they've been around for a very long time.
I would say the successful communities are, so a lot of successful communities are spiritual communities, and there are communities out there that aren't public. Now, I would also say that the other successful communities do have a kind of spiritual thing. It might not be religious, but they have a very strong shared common goal in wanting to accomplish something or live a certain way. And they are gathering together, like you said, with a community building, at least once a week, getting together and really communicating with each other and doing activities together, learning how to communicate with each other better, so that when conflicts arise, it's not conflicts with people they don't know very well. Would you say that's accurate?
I think that yeah, I think that a lot of the stuff, a lot of the spiritual stuff is a lot of the spiritual communities, a lot of the successful communities they are central leader, and it's kind of like if you're in a monastery, then it's the abbot that makes the calls, and everybody's going to do, what the abbot says. And if there's a new person there, then the new person, it's not like the new person's going to show up and say, okay, now y'all are going to change everything now that I'm here. The new person doesn't have a lot to say. The new person is going to live their life according to the precedent that has already been set and what they observe. They might talk about the other monastery that they were living in, but I don't think that I mean, if you're going to change the way things are, you have to persuade the abbot. You can't just say like, okay, I've got 4 of the other monks agree with me, and the other 25 monks are just stupid, and so we're all going to change the whole monastery. It's like that's not how it goes down. So anyway, perhaps the spiritual element helps in some way, but I kind of feel like as we're designing a different way, which it is a throw of the dice, will it work better? We won't know until we try, and this is Wheaton Labs, so it's all about experimenting. Unfortunately, we're experimenting with people's lives. At the same time, it's a voluntary thing. No one's locked in or anything like that. And so they choose to participate. They choose to try. And it sounds like the upsides, they are definitely enjoying the upsides. And in fact, it kind of sounds like everything here is really, really great. And now we want stuff to change.
And we're gonna dive into this much more detail later.
Okay, so let me go back to the question.
My favorite part of Roger's question here is the middle part. In the past, if you left your community, you might starve, be much worse off economically, be literally isolated. Today, the downside of leaving any community is very low, which is good and bad. And that's a very interesting topic for me.
If you get divorced, suddenly everything costs twice as much. Well, not necessarily twice as much, but everything, suddenly your income is lower and your expenses are higher. And so it is difficult. If you are a part of a community with 10 people, and then you decide to leave it, then you're going to go live by yourself. I think your expenses are going to go way up, and your quality of living is going to go way down. But if there was a lot of drama in that community, totally worth it. And so it's going to be, all right, you are going to be worse off economically today. I think that. And plus, we're all kind of used to the whole idea of like you live in this city, or you could live in the country, but usually you live in the city, and you're going to have a job, and you get paid a certain amount. You pay your mortgage, you pay your car payment, you pay your student loans, you pay for your ungodly insurance. This is the life that you've signed up for, and this, like what we're trying to do here, is to offer people an escape, an alternative, and we'll talk about next time about why. But I like to think that if a person is bonkers about permaculture in the same flavor that I am, that this would be a super sweet deal. And I think that's what these folks were experiencing, a super sweet deal. And they want it to be a little sweeter based on their standards, which are different from mine. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what's at the foundation of this. All right, and the last part is, Paul mentioned spiritual aspect of community. Would introducing permaculture to existing spiritual stuff make any sense that they already have the community thing working? I think that would be fine.
I think they'd benefit greatly by introducing permaculture into any church.
I would imagine that, like, let's say that we'll go back to the monastery example, and you're in the monastery and they don't know about permaculture, and then somebody starts reading up about it. They get bonkers about permaculture. Can you persuade the rest of the group to consider it, let alone the abbot?
Probably not.
Yeah, it might be hard. I mean, they're probably already set on a certain path, and they might not be as interested, but who knows, they might. I would think that it would be great if I were living in a monastery and I wanted to convince the abbot. I think I might start off saying, can I have a patch of ground to do horticultural things my way?
Right.
And then, then it's up to me to make it a great success, and then others would be like, I want to do that too. And
yeah.
So frustration.
Where I can see the big pushback from the abbot's point of view is that in any community like this, food's a very important thing in any community. And there's going to be certain ways you're getting food. If you're getting your own food, or you have disciplines, and like long time, this has been going on for a long time, these kind of disciplines of how we get food, why we get food, it's built into the society of the community. That's why it's such a big pushback to just go ahead and change all of that. There's a lot that has to change, not just the way you're making food.
So I kind of feel like I wish to live in community. I wish to eat from a permaculture system and live in a natural building. There's stuff that I want, and so I'm trying to figure out how to have the things that I want to have. So I'm prepared to sacrifice an enormous amount to have the things that I would like to have. And also I'm prepared to sacrifice a lot in order to see the future of permaculture exist. And I don't even know what exactly that might be, but I've got a lot of ideas and things I wish to see tried.
I think that you've sacrificed a great deal in the experimentation. You're the one that's doing a lot of the experimenting that a lot of other people are not doing, and that takes a lot of sacrifice to do. It's because there's a lot of resources that go into experimenting to make sure things can be replicated and successful. And so you're definitely sacrificing a great deal to get that accomplished. And I would like to say thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Let's see. On Roger's comment, in the past, if you left your community, you might starve. I would also say that if you were leaving your community in the past, it's probably because you were starving because the rest of the community was not allowing you to have food, probably because you were some kind of fucking asshole. All right. Until next week, guys, great job. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I look forward to your questions next week. And Fred, thanks for joining us. We'll see you week after next.
Thanks, Josiah.
All right.
Bye.